Hi, Misha here, and I'm sure at least some have noticed that I haven't really posted many videos in the last 2 weeks. In fact, just one or two kind of oddball ones that have been sitting around. I said 2 weeks ago, at the beginning of July, that I was planning on doing a video on an aircraft carrier. That's still in the works, but the day or so after I posted the Harrier video, the FRS-1, we had a bit of a personal family tragedy. The good news is all humans are okay, but unfortunately we lost one of the animals, one of the pets, and it was actually the one that we have had the longest and was probably most endeared and kind of buried in our lives. So wanted to talk about that, share the experience for better or worse. Some might find it kind of odd, those of us who get that attached to animals. That's okay, but for some of us, it's just kind of how it goes, especially rescue animals that need us and we are with for a decade. And in some ways, for people like me, it's easier to open up to a dog or a cat or other animal. There's something a little more direct about all that. So instead of, focusing on the thing, let's talk about the life of Oscar the cat. And I dug up an old video called Cat Biography, one of the earliest things I did on this personal channel. So let's cut over to that. I apologize for the old camera, but hey, it's what I got. And we'll come back here outside. It's a little after midnight and just kind of enjoying the fact that it's no longer 100 degrees out. This is Oscar the cat, and this is Misha. This is our first kind of cat biography. This is pretty much what Oscar does. He would be sitting in my lap if I was sitting down, but I'm sorry if the lighting's maybe not excellent, but he doesn't like leaving the room too much. He's pretty shy. In my kind of introduction to cats, I talked about a cat we found on our front porch amongst three. This was him. Remember I said gray. I said that was a gray cat. You'll notice Oscar is not especially gray, I would say. He changed color. When we got him as a kitten, when he showed up, we didn't get him, he kind of got us. He was just solid, kind of neutral, middle gray. Then he developed spots, then they turned into stripes, and now you see him here. He actually has a lot of bobcat appearance. He's got little tufts on his ears, he's kind of got a bushy tail, and he's got kind of the underbelly like a bobcat. And he has an incredibly gentle disposition. He's just, he's very shy. In fact, when we moved, it kind of nearly traumatized him a bit, frankly, folks. But he's alright. So yeah, he showed up there. I found him in those boxes. He came running out. The other two kittens he came with were just nowhere to be seen. But Oscar was there. He came running towards me, kind of his little meow. He doesn't have much of a meow, do you, Oscar? And yeah, that was that. We brought him in. He sat in my lap for hours just purring that day. And we've had him ever since. The thing is, a couple of days after he came in the house, I brought him in. He started meowing when I would touch one of his front legs here. I forget if it was the left or the right. It turns out the poor guy had been bitten by a brown recluse spider and his leg was starting to swell up. Well, after my past experiences with cats not making it, I said, hell no, and took him to the vets, and they took care of him, gave him medicine, and he did sit in a chair for a few days, like you're seeing now, but he recovered, and he's been fine ever since. He had a cold a few years ago, but other than that, he's fine. We've had him over 5 years now. He gets around with other cats just fine, but he mostly just keeps to himself. He likes to sit on the lap or he really likes to sit on the arm of my chair while I work. He's my cat, really. He's always kind of gravitated towards me, probably because I brought him in, and when he was sick, I tended to be the one that gave him his medicine and stuff because my wife was at work. That's pretty much Oscar. Right, buddy? So he will actually call if I whistle. But yeah, Oscar the Bobcat cat. He's our oldest cat. Well, I mean, not biologically, but the one we've had the longest. And it's just a real good little buddy. You probably haven't seen him in many videos because, again, he mostly keeps to himself in the back part of the house. Well, this is kind of our first cat biography video. Hope you enjoyed it. Hey, you guys have been asking for cat vids, so here you go. Appreciate you tuning in, and I will do more of these as I can track down the cats around the place. This is Misha, and I will catch you next time. Alright, put you down in the box. So, to kind of add to that biography, yeah, that was over 9 years ago. We were on the 10th year with Oscar. You know, average life expectancy of a cat is 10 to 15 years. I've had one live to be almost 21 before, but I have noticed that males do tend to live less than females, unfortunately. And of course, everything's up for grabs. And, you know, he should have had more time. 10 years is not enough, but based on where he came from and being a foundling, being a rescue, it could have been far less. In fact, one of the things I told my mother when we got him right after we did the vet experience, I said that, you know, sometimes it's good to save a life, even a little life, because it was the first rescue cat my wife and I got, and I had a couple of rescue cats early in my life, but it had been many a year. And when he showed up, it was a Friday night. My wife at that time was working as a waitress Friday nights, and came home, about 10 that evening, and it was a hot July, much like just right now, middle of July. And she said there's some kittens in the front yard, and there was a neighbor walking by, you know, doing the evening walk because it was hot. I guess it was the, you know, best time he could. He said, yeah, he'd seen them around, and there were 3. There was Oscar, of course, who at that time was just gray, solid, just gray cat. And then he had 2 siblings, which, I don't know, I guess they were brothers. But they started, you know, kind of palling around, and so we got some cat food and took some water out, mixed it with just the tiniest amount of milk just to entice them to drink it. But yeah, I know, don't give cats milk, I know, but, you know, like a, you know, already 1% milk, and then you dilute it 10 down, it's fine. They'd been eating trash can food, old McDonald's that had been dumped in the trash can, because next door to our old house was actually the EMS, who, believe it or not, were good neighbors. They never ran the siren on the block. But anyway, so of the 3 cats, the other 2 were black and white. One of them was really timid, shy, and mild, and had no trouble coming in the house. We kind of just brought him in that Saturday just to see what they react like. The other one, that looked virtually the same, was really rambunctious and spunky and fun and playful, but she was kind of nervy about being in the house. And poor little gray Oscar, he kind of looked plain compared to those two, if I'm being honest. And he was kind of in the middle. He was a little bit spunky, and he didn't necessarily mind going in the house, but that day he was a little apprehensive. And kind of feel bad. We talked about, well, maybe we'll keep one and find the other two home. And I wanted one of the cats, and I honestly can't remember if it was the spunky one or the shy one, and my wife wanted to keep the other. And in hindsight, I always felt bad that it was actually Oscar, that both of us kind of had an unspoken thing that we would try to home him. But of course, we didn't know him at that time. And then, as I recounted in the bio video, that Sunday she was gone somewhere, and I went out to find the cats, and they were there right after church got out, noon, 12:30. But then a couple hours later, I went to check on them because, again, it was hot. I was trying to give them water, and they were gone. And I was like, crap. I knew I should have at least brought one of them in because, there's dogs, there's cars. You never know. And they were small little kittens, 8 weeks, maybe 12 weeks old on the outside. But then, like I said, I went around the place, and they were gone. And then I had a kind of a outdoor, it was actually an old garage, like an old style carport, and it had boxes in it, and I was kind of kittying, and then I was about to leave, and I heard rustling in the very far back, and so I kittied again, heard a little more rustling. I was thinking, oh great, am I about to call up a possum or an armadillo or my luck, a skunk, because those are all around the neighborhood. Where we used to live was pretty rural. And then I heard the tiniest little meow, and then Oscar came out, and he came up to me and basically put my hands down, and he jumped in them, and I was like, okay, let's bring you in, buddy. And that was it. That's when I said he just kind of came in and sat on my lap and purred. Ironically, J-Ro's dad, Doc, came over that afternoon. He was picking up an FAL receiver I had spare. He wanted one for a build. I think it was Argentine. Anyway, so he was actually probably the first person to meet Oscar. And then that was a Sunday, and it wasn't just that, it was that Monday or Tuesday, just right after we brought him in, that we noticed his leg had been bitten and it was sensitive. And as I said in the bio video, I wasn't taking chances, so we rushed him to the vet. Our local vet, who's still there even today, is a good vet, a good town vet. He's reasonably priced and quite effective at saving animals, and he's good with like bites and that outdoor stuff, because that's what he has a lot of exposure with. But he can't remember if he stayed one night there, but anyway, he came home really quick, and then I basically played nursemaid to Oscar. He slept in a chair, and he had to take him to the litter box and kind of bring him food or take him to the food, because he could only put pressure on his leg for very brief periods in the beginning, as he healed. But it took about 2 weeks really to heal up where he could put weight on it and the swelling to completely go down. And then after that, of course, he was our cat. And from there, and what we'll say too, and this is, I don't recommend it. In fact, he was the last one we ever did it to. We had him declawed. Now I know that's bad, but 20 years ago, that was what you did for house cats. In fact, when I first got a cat, that was the one thing I had to do. My parents made me agree to, was to have it declawed, because it would, scratch the furniture, and they will. But now I think we're a little more evolved, and we just kind of let them do it, or scratching posts, work around them. But for several years, we declawed cats. Now he was not a four paw amputee, thank goodness. He had his back claws at least. We never did that. It was always just the fronts. And again, he was the last one, so don't at me, I know. But, live and learn, guys. But on the other hand, he had his full rabies shots. He had his full vaccines. We took him in, and we did get him neutered. Fun story about that. He was getting right up to about that age. Like I said, we didn't know really how old he was when we got him, so we tried to we definitely didn't want him to get too old and start, spraying. But we waited a couple of weeks, at least a couple of months probably, or at least a month. So it was towards the end of summer, I guess. And I told him the night before he was gone, I said, well, buddy, if you got any wild oats to sow, you better do it tonight. And so we went to bed, and I kid you not, we woke up that morning at dawn, and he was humping a blanket. First time he'd ever done it, at least that we'd seen. So he obviously took me very, very serious. We took him to the vets. He stayed a night over there because chop, you know. And when he was in a pink blanket, a pink towel, we took him in and went to pick him up. And the nurse there said she hardly ever, really never saw a cat so happy to see his owners. Because, I mean, he was in pain. He'd been through surgery. But the moment he saw us, even across the room, he just started purring. And he came over to us, snuggled in. And that's how it kind of always was with him. When we made the pain go away. We made the spider bite go. We fed him when he was hungry. We gave him good food. We fed our cats, Imes, and dogs. And he was just very sincere and grateful. But it never changed with him. You know, he recovered very quickly. Even after we got him home from being neutered, I held him and I said, hey, do you want to go use the bathroom or whatever? Nope. He just sat in my lap. I figured, yep, I'm about to be peed on. But he never did. He never had accidents that I can remember. He took to the litter box real good. He was just grateful to have a home. But once in a while, his little wild cat nature would kind of get the better of him, and he'd just be a little bit mischievous, like sitting in the window in the house, teasing outside cats, you know, just like, neener, I'm inside. And he had his little bit of ways. We had another cat, and we had a little flappy door that led into the room that had their litter boxes. And he wouldn't like block her in there, but he'd stand about a foot away from the flappy door, which would piss her off and trap her in there. And he'd just stand there quietly. He knew what he was doing. He was just teasing her. But he had that little bit of that kind of made him just a little bit spirited. But for the most part, he liked to sit on my lap or a chair next to me. And if that wasn't available, he was happy by sitting on my feet or by my feet. And speaking of, here's another somewhat more recent video done a year or two after the first one there, when we were doing Cat Wings, a little series looking at Grumman planes. But here's Oscar's little short clip from that. I know the top of his head's cut off, but hey, you can see his tail and whiskers, most of them. Oscar, the bobcat of the house. Very, very masculine and frightening, aren't you, Oscar? Yeah. So we had him at the old house, but we moved here in October of 2014. So he was with us at the old house, got quite a year and a half. And he was there. The last animal we lost before him was my Labrador, Prince. He was 14, so good age for a Labrador. He passed in September of 2014. And it actually was kind of the right time because we were trying to figure out how we're going to move him. He had cataracts. He couldn't hear real well. His hips, he couldn't get up and down stairs too good. And he knew the house because he'd been living there, but we were really worried about moving him to a new house and just the trauma of moving. And animals kind of know, but he passed quietly in the backyard under one of his favorite trees. Since it had been summertime when he passed in September, so it'd still been warm weather, we put him outside because he was having accidents in the house, which we'd clean up, but it embarrassed the crap out of the dog because he knew that wasn't right, so it was better for everyone. And the reason I mention it, him and Oscar were buddies from the beginning, and so imagine a 90-pound Labrador and a little cat. I mean, Oscar was never big at all. I mean, for a male, he was quite small. But Oscar would sleep with Prince and had a big pillow, dog bed pillow for Prince, maybe 3 foot by 3 or 4 by 4, big. And when Prince passed, Oscar would lay on that pillow for well, really until we moved, which was about 2 weeks after we, did that happen. But it was kind of fun to see this tiny little cat, who by this point had grown from gray to spotted to stripes, sleeping on this dog's big bed. So he missed him. And I think that's one thing that I kind of noticed there too. That was Oscar was my last connection to my dog, if that makes sense, and to my dad, because my dad was one of those people that if you ever needed help with your animals, taking him to the vet, picking him up, he'd do it in a heartbeat. And he took Oscar, or picked me up, a few times getting Oscar there. So he knew him. Once we moved up here and got more cats, he met them occasionally. I even took a couple home for Christmas once or twice with us, but he never was taking him in his truck and stuff, if that makes sense, just spending time. Oscar was not real fond of the move. He liked his home, and he wasn't real keen on moving. He definitely didn't have a little poopy accident in the box when we moved him up here. We just pretend like that never happened. And when he first moved in, he did not know what to do. But once he got settled in the house, he was fine. He always kind of hanging out in my office room or our bedroom, and at night, when we went to bed. He'd go around the rest of the house some. And for a couple of years there, he'd even kind of go outside when it was summer weather, just for a minute, in the backyard for a couple hours just to do cat things. But he never really was big on the backyard. And what he would do that was kind of funny, my wife would say, and people would say, that we had kind of a long hallway in my office. It kind of ended like a T shape, and the office was on one side. He'd poke his head around the corner just enough. You could see one ear and about half an eye. So maybe a third of his face, just to see if company was there, or if it was safe for the going. And if it was people he didn't know, he'd nope the hell out of there. But if it was people he'd learned to trust, he'd come in. He probably wouldn't go visit with them. If he did, he'd just say hello. But he, at least if he was comfortable with it, he'd come up to me and jump on my lap. And he wasn't one of those cats you had to constantly pet. He just liked to be near. That was kind of his deal. If you wanted to pet him, great, but you didn't have to. He was perfectly okay. That's why he was able to sit with me while I worked, because he never got in the way of me typing or anything. Now, sometimes throughout the day, he'd kind of nose me, and he always had this little wet nose. His nose was always a little moist, and so I put this little rubby on my arm, and that just meant he needed a couple of scritchy scratches. He liked his ears and his under his neck scratched. But if I did that for 5 minutes, and he'd settle back down, and that was it. Looking at that chair you saw in the videos, another one of our cats, who's actually our oldest cat, although we've only had her since 2016, Hobo, they would fight over the chair. Not fight like hissy, but they'd wait till the other one jumped out and then immediately jump in it. And then it would, cycle up. They'd never hissed at all, but they'd play little psychological games with each other. Like Oscar would just kind of stare at her, and she'd get on top of the chair and gently reach down and just kind of tap him on the head with her foot, with her paw, and just little games. But I've noticed now that he's gone, she's not really in the chair much, because I think that was like their little dominance thing, and now that he's gone, it's not fun. All the cats kind of seem out of sorts, even though it's been a couple of weeks. Oscar's life over the last years has been quiet, uneventful, dependable, scheduled, which is exactly what he wanted. As I said in the clip, he did get a kitty cold after we moved up here in 2014. We moved up here, and then in 2015, we decided to go to the shelter and rescue another cat. We wanted to get an adult cat, kind of to be my wife's cat, which worked out great. That was Seamus. Oscar was kind of mine, so he'd be hers, and it worked out perfectly. And Seamus took to the house awesome. Usually when you get a new cat, they hide and hiss. Nope, that cat walked around the house just trilling to himself and meowing, and if he saw one of us, he'd walk up to us and meow, meow, meow. He was just so thrilled. And luckily, he and Oscar got along great. Both being neutered males. Yeah, but there was no. We used to call them brothers because they just kind of palled around, and it was great. Seamus was bigger than Oscar, but that's okay. But Seamus brought the kitty cold from the kennel home, and it wasn't. I don't think it ever got to the point of life-threatening, but we ended up taking him to the vet. Okay, to be fair, we took him to the 24/7 clinic because, frankly, our cats have a propensity for getting sick on holiday weekends, and that was either Memorial Day or 4th of July. But I remember it was a summer weekend. They got sick, so we took them to the clinic. They got them a little bit of antibiotics, and they basically just told us that their lungs are still clear. They were coughing and sneezing a bit, but they said basically the cats get it at the kennel, and when they're at high stress, they fight it off. But when they relax, get to a place they feel safe, their guard is down, and then it comes on. And then, of course, he shared it with Oscar because that's the kind of cat he is. But, I had to nurse him a little bit. What I remember about that, they said if you steam them, take them into the bathroom, turn the shower on as hot as you can, and get it really steamy. They said it'll help them, breathe and clear out the gunk. So I'd sit in that stupid bathroom with those cats and steam them a couple of times a day, every frickin' day for a week or more. But you know what? It worked. And again, nothing's too good for our animals, dogs or cats. And my wife and I completely agree that when you take responsibility, when you take ownership, if you prefer, or custodianship, guardianship, if you prefer, of an animal, that's a commitment. Like, you can't just change your mind. That's a thing. And you become responsible for them. And, they're a living creature. They're a mammal just like us, and they have feelings. Now, their feelings may be different than ours, but they still have the same feelings as we do. And they may not have the intellectual prowess of some humans, although other humans, I'm not entirely sure. But they think in their own ways. They have instinct, they think, and Oscar's a prime example of they can be grateful and they can be loving. And there's no way in the world that cat didn't love us and trust us. In fact, my wife always used to tell him that he trusted us way too much because I could pick him up anytime, anywhere, and just carry him around. He didn't care. He'd purr. I could do anything to him, make him do little kitty dances, or he'd come to the bathroom. He wasn't worried about me dunking him. He didn't share any of the common things that cats did. The other thing he wasn't crazy about, like I said, were strangers. But if it was just us, and he knew we would not hurt him, and that's a really good feeling, to have someone, something, trust you just that implicitly and completely. And you don't even always get that with dogs and cats. If you're lucky, you do, but some of them always have that little bit of, hesitancy, especially for us, because we've adopted a lot of shelter cats and even several abused victims, and we've worked with them and done rehab, but some of that stuff never goes away completely. But Oscar was kind of the old man because he was the first cat that was here, so all the other cats came when he was already here, so he was a fixture, and he got on well with them. He'd play once in a while, even at his age. I mean, he's kind of getting to be middle age, and if he got stressed, he'd lose fur, especially if he ever had to take him to the vet for a checkup. He was not a fan of the vet. He'd just start shedding fur like there was no tomorrow. And he had a lot of fur to shed because of his, at least partial wildcat nature. He had like the double layer coat, and it was kind of that woolly, cottony fur. It wasn't the sleek type, if that makes sense. He even kind of smelled like a wildcat. Not exactly sour, but kind of just a little bit sweet, sour smell. My wife used to say kind of like a sock, like a wool sock. Not a dirty one, but like, one that'd been sitting in your sock drawer for a couple of months. Just the sock smell. And funny story about his collar, too. We tried several collars on him. He'd take them off. He actually found his collar, and it was actually one that had belonged to the previous cat. He found it under the sofa, I think. She had shedded it there, and that's the one he wanted to wear. And every time we tried to give him a fresh new one, he'd take it off, and we put that one on, he'd keep it. So that's what he wanted, so we just left it on him for a decade nearly. The rest of his life was pleasantly quiet ever since he got the kitty cold. He never really got sick again. He got a little bit of a droopy eye one time for a bit, a little bit of a runny eye. I think they said it was allergies, but we got him a little topical cream, and that went away. It wasn't anything bad, just, seasonal changes. But he was, generally speaking, healthy. He continued to use the litter box normally. He just wasn't ever a problem. And he was just quietly always there. And, you don't realize sometimes people or animals that are like that, because they're not bombastic, they're not in your face, but you realize later that you become so accustomed to them being there. And he was a great cat. If you were sad, you could just pick him up and cuddle him, hug him, and his solution when you were sad was he'd always just look at you like, what would make you feel better? Petting me. And you know what? He was right. It would make you feel better. Okay, this isn't ideal. I actually tried for a while to get a picture in the video. It's not easy to do when you can't actually see the editor. So, I had my wife pull it up on her computer. Maybe you can see it. This is the only old picture I have, and I didn't even think I even had it. I was searching an old hard drive for something not this, and it popped up, and I was super excited because I thought this photo was lost to time a long time ago. So that's an old 1919 I was transferring for a friend, and it sat on the kitchen table in our old house. And he climbed in and was sleeping in the tripod while I was there. Yeah, it's just kind of him as a middle-aged kitten, just with dots but not stripes yet. And just showing. Again, hopefully something shows up here. I did my best. I'll also put this as the thumbnail for the video, so maybe you can see it that way. But there's Oscar from this video. This picture was taken in 2013. So, yeah, not long after we got him, really. So that's Oscar's life. But we have to talk about how it came to an end. And thankfully it was quite sudden. He was fine this year, starting off, no problems, doing his usual thing, routine, playing with the other cats, fighting for the chair with Hobo. And just a couple of weeks ago, I noticed he was getting a little, like, kind of bony in his back, like his backbone was sticking up just a little bit. And his shoulder blades were poking up just a little bit. But he wasn't thin, like he still had a belly, nothing bad, just a little bit. So he wasn't starving, and I noticed he was eating. Like every time I put food there, he was amongst the first cats to quietly be there to eat. So I noticed he was eating, drinking, going to the bathroom. Although he was a sneaky pooper. My wife told him when she took him to the vet and they asked him about his bowel movement, she said, look, in the years we've had him, I maybe have seen him poop twice. He was always really quiet about that. But anywho, did my best to observe him, but I just had a kind of a not good feeling, and he was getting a little bit lethargic. He was still jumping, but he's maybe getting a little too clingy, like a little too just wanting to be, like, for example, he was starting to sleep with us right next to our pillows every night, whereas before it was maybe every other night or, whatever. Other times he was gallivanting, he was getting a little too bony on top, and I thought, well, could just be age. He's getting to that age, and I've seen other male cats kind of change as they get older, lose a little bit of mass. And I thought maybe he's got a hairball, or maybe he's something stuck up in his gut. Maybe he's not able. Maybe he's throwing up some of his food. I don't know. Didn't have a great feeling, and I told her we need to take him to the vet and just see what's up. Just intuition. It had been about a year and a half since he went, I guess, the last time in November of 2020. So, yeah, about a year and a half. Keep in mind COVID, so it was a little hard to get him there. And so we were going to do it that week, but it was a busy week where I was doing a lot of work with J-Ro. And so here we are, holiday weekend. And she said, and we actually tried to get him into our regular vets that Friday or Saturday, and they were open, but they were just totally booked up. And I knew on Mondays they're open, but their regular doctors usually aren't there, so there's only limited stuff they can do. And I told her we need to take him to this 24/7 clinic. I don't know, just intuition. And so she was going to get up about 11 and take him that day at noon. So it was kind of hard to sleep Friday night, but he slept right next to us, purring. But I noticed he wasn't talking as much. As I said in the video, usually if I whistled, he would meow or come up to me. He would still come to me when I whistled, but he wouldn't meow, he wouldn't talk. And that was a little odd for him. Sometimes he wouldn't, but usually he would at least half the time. I don't know, you don't have someone in your life and that can't, not be able to tell when they're sick. So I was pretty apprehensive, but figured, well, he's been in good health. He's acting pretty normal. Maybe it's something, maybe he's got a little illness or blockage, maybe he needs to change his food. I don't know. And I had a little reprieve. I woke up, it was about 12 or 1, and he was nosing me. And I thought, oh, they're already back from the vets. And I had this dream that was my wife telling me, yeah, I took him there, and they can't really quite figure out what's wrong, but they say he's fine. Maybe try this or that. Okay, great. And then I realized later she'd slept in and didn't get him to the vets until about 4 that day. And so my reprieve, well, it was quite nice, and nice that he and I got to kind of visit with each other. Yeah, so she ended up taking him to the vet. I would put him in the cat carrier, say goodbye, because she was going to she's going to drop him off and go grocery shopping, because they're busy. They usually have to put him in a waiting area for a while, but no reason for her to be there. But so she dropped him off, and kind of started on with my day. But yeah, it was about to take a turn, unfortunately. Here at the table, because I wanted to show you Oscar's pillow. Okay, before you click off and think I've completely lost my marbles. This is what he's slept on for about the last year. Something my mother did after my father died. He always wore reasonably nice button-down shirts to work, and so she turned his shirts into pillows, giving everyone in the family a couple of pillows. She likes to sew, and kind of in her hobby. A little pocket here, and a shirt pocket. And so we put a couple of these on our bed, including one in between our pillows, my wife and I's. And Oscar kind of claimed that as his. And perfectly okay with that. My dad would have liked that. And funnily enough, while Oscar was with us, none of the other cats ever really tried to lay on it, which is kind of surprising. So yeah, Oscar's pillow, which was once one of my dad's shirts that was turned into a pillow by my mother. So I think you can understand why that's a few different levels of, meaningful to me. She called me about 5:30 and said, yeah, we need to talk. It's not good. And I just instantly thought, yeah, I know. I don't know why, but it was, sometimes you get that shocked feeling, there's that electric charge that goes through your body. It was the opposite of that. It was just like, yeah, I don't know why. I just thought so. So basically she said the doctor wasn't sure, but it didn't look good. It's either a mutated infection or more likely cancer, maybe leukemia. And said, well, what do we want to do? And she said, well, they drained 600 milliliters of fluid off of him. And this had just built up in just a few days. I mean, I told you he was getting a little kind of irregular shaped, and I just had noticed it more and more just like those last couple of days. And she said, well, the doctor's in surgery right now, but she said she could call later, and she was gone again to go somewhere, and the doctor called about 9 that night, again, 24/7 clinic, and asked the doctor if she'd be there till 2. So I said, well, what's up? And she said, he's here. Our internalist, our specialist that can really get in there, won't be here till Tuesday. Okay? The problem with that is they couldn't start him on any kind of painkillers, relaxants, steroids, if they wanted to get clear test results. So basically, if I wanted to wait till Tuesday, he'd have to suffer for 3 days. And the best they could do is just drain, fluid. And I said, well, what do you think it is? And what do you think that, even if your internalist comes, even if the diagnosis is those things, what do you think? She said, well, if it's the cancer, the leukemia, we can do chemotherapy. But as quickly as this came on, especially the fluid buildup, yeah. And I've read up a little bit on cats getting chemo, and it's a thing. Not only is it very expensive, she said at least $4,000, which again, that's just money. If it were definitely going to save a life, but even then, the chances were not great. And you have to be really weird with their food. You have to dispose their food and make sure that none of the other cats get a hold of it. Something like that. It's a thing. I said, well, what if it's the other thing, that mutation? I wish I could remember exactly what she said, but actually it was a mutation of COVID, and kitty COVID, not human COVID, which kind of made me think of when you had the kitty cold all those years ago. She said basically it's a side effect, a mutation caused from when they have a illness like a cold or flu when they're younger. I was like, and that could be, because he had that, and while it wasn't exactly life-threatening, it took him a couple of weeks to recover. I said, well, what if it's that? And she said, well, there's really no treatment. She said, the only thing is there are some drugs, but they're black market. I said, what? Yeah, the only drugs that could potentially help, not really cure it, but treat it or at least sustain him, you would have to get basically black market from Canada, Mexico, or somewhere else. That didn't excite me for so many reasons, logistically. I mean, imagine the horror if your animal was being sustained by something that you might not be able to get for very long. So I said, yeah, I don't know about any of that. Plus, if we want to wait on the internalist, he can't get any kind of even palliative treatment now. And she said, I hate to go there so quickly, but euthanasia. Because she said, even if he survives, she's really concerned about quality of life. And I 100% agree. I am very much a quality over quantity person. And a cat especially, they have to be able to run and jump and do cat things. If they can't go to the litter box and take care of them, you know how independent cats are. And it's just, he wouldn't have gone for that. So I told her, let me talk with my wife and I'll call you back. And she said, yeah, I'll be here till 2. So, I said, tell you what, I don't see any reason to wait for the internalists, because no matter what they find, I mean, it's good to know, but it seems like the two most likely things, there's no real great hope. She said, look, 99% he's not going to get through this. You can you can stretch it out a week or two by treatment and all this, but eventually it's going to get bad. And I get that. I've had animals get to that point, and it's sad. And keep in mind, he's still, maybe not quite as talkative and, energetic as usual, but he's still himself for the most part. And it's okay. Well, my wife gets home. I'll talk with her. She was out getting us dinner, because on Saturdays typically we eat out, and we'll make a decision and whatnot. I said, no. My wife had wanted me to ask, could we bring him home maybe for a week to say goodbye and then bring him back? And she said, you might get a week, you might even get 2. But as quickly as the fluid built up, and as small as he was, and as much, this is over half a liter taken from this poor guy, she said, I'm afraid you'll be back here in a day or 2. Okay, fair enough. She was really a straight shooter. She was compassionate, not at all cold, but I don't like being BS'd, and, she told me it'd be $4,000 or $5,000 for chemotherapy. I mean, she was just in it for the money. She'd have pushed for that. Okay, well, we'll talk and get that. And I told my wife, I said, look, if we knew he'd be home and relatively hale and happy for a week, but I said, look, if we go get him and he thinks he's out of the woods and home, and then we have to take him right back there in a couple of days, that'll be cruel. Plus, if he starts to get worse, think about the other cats. They're going to see that. And I know what those, if it gets into the lungs or that area, they start foaming, they start choking, they stop being able to breathe, or they start, messing themselves, not being able to control their bowels, or they start throwing up because they're not able to digest anything, or they just start to kind of like lose motor control in general. It is heartbreaking and horrifying. Now, my wife was off that Monday because it was 4th of July, but she'd go back to work, and I said, what's going to happen if he gets sick on Tuesday and you're not here? I said, am I going to watch my cat just die and not be able to do anything for him? I've been there too. Years ago, we had a cat, Koshka. Yeah, they got hit by a car, and I didn't have the money to do euthanasia. Her whole back end was, so we had to do it ourselves. Jero helped with that, even though it scarred him too, because we all liked that cat. She was a good cat. Been there, done that, never want to do it again. That was horrendous. Plus, she was in pain, and so I told the doc, I said, give him, I know they have, basically Valium or equivalent for dogs and cats. I said, dope him up. I said, make him comfortable and happy, because I know how much he's scared of hospitals. I said, just put him in La La Land. Don't knock him out, but put him in a good mood. We'll be there in a couple hours after we eat dinner, and just process this, because, not even a day ago, he was fine, or at least maybe a little sick, but nothing too bad. So she gets back, we eat, and we leave about 10:30 that night to go over and essentially say goodbye. And that was hard. That was a very, very hard car trip. That was even harder getting out of the car. It was even harder going into the vets and not completely breaking down. And then in the room, they put us in a private room with him. They brought him in, and just like he did as a kitten, he started purring, because even though he was hurt, we were there. We made the pain go away before. He trusted us. We were taking him home, and he was going to be okay. That's what he thought. And this time I couldn't make the pain go away. Well, I mean, I could, but not in. I couldn't take him home. Luckily, he didn't know that. So, brought him in for a bit, petted him. Again, tried not to lose total control, because I didn't want to scare him. He sat at my lap and purred. I brought his favorite pillow, so he sat on his favorite pillow and in my lap and had his ears scratched. He had a medical tag around his neck with his name on it, and of course he had an IV in his paw where they were draining fluid and giving him medicine, because they had him on the good stuff. Hey, no expenses spared from my cats. And we visited with him for a bit. I just told my wife, are you ready? And yeah, so she pushed the button, the doc came in, and they asked us if we'd ever been through this before, and she said she hadn't, but I had, unfortunately. But they gave him the first shot, and he purred and quietly fell asleep in my lap. And that's the last memory he had. And took him over to the table and gave him the second shot. And it really did amaze me just how quick, quietly, and without pain he went. And I knew it was and the doctor actually told us right then. She said, "You made the right decision." And I know it was the right one for him, but goddamn, was it the one that hurt the most for us. Because, yeah, it was the right thing for him, but Jesus Christ. But he didn't suffer, and he was still himself at the end. But that wouldn't have lasted for very long. And, well, that's why I didn't feel like posting videos for a couple of weeks, guys. In fact, I was pretty goddamn depressed for the first few days and barely wanted to get out of bed 4th of July and the day after. And I'd be lying if I said I didn't cry a lot. But I did it in a quiet, manly way, I promise. No bawling, I promised. I definitely wasn't bawling my eyes out in the shower. But he went peacefully. And that's the least we could have done for him. And I hope in whatever kitty dreams he had at the end, he was on his way home, back to his house. And that's it. Well, not quite it. Actually, not quite it at all. I have one more live clip to share with you. So, there was one final thing. What to do with his remains. Of course, they would dispose of them. Or you could pay a few dollars for what they call it, like a public funeral or whatever. Basically, they would get the body cremated and scatter the ashes in a park. But that's not what Oscar would have wanted. He liked being with us. So, I paid a little extra, and it wasn't much. And, well, here is Oscar. I paid for the so-called private funeral, not knowing what we would get. We figured we'd get the ashes back in a bag, and hopefully that would be in a metal urn. And I was really just hopeful it would have his name on it. Not only does it have his name on a metal placard, it's actually in a very handsome small trunk, complete with lock. It's a simple lock, of course, but it's the thought that counts. It's actual real wood. Very nicely done. And this officially means I am a crazy person. Story to tell you, when I was getting my first guide dog named Brandy, that was up in New York, I met his sponsors. And the woman had a capsule around her neck which had ashes in it. They had named Brandy, my dog, in honor of their dog Brandy. Fair enough. I thought she was a little bit wackadoodle for carrying her dog's ashes around with her. That's still a bit much for me. But, growing up where I was at, you dug a hole in the backyard and you buried your animals, and maybe you mark their spot with some type of headstone, cross, whatever. But here I am giving my cat the best, I don't know, just respect, showing respect. And I will keep him with me. Again, if he was an outside cat, I would scatter his ashes, but it's not what he was. He wanted to be with me. I'm not going to open it, of course, to show you, but he is in there. I did trip once. So, he went out on the pillow, and here he is here. I didn't really know what to expect. And even with this, we were very pleased with the courtesy. They sent us a email kind of conciliating with us. Unfortunately, last week, from Peter, they always send us birthday cards for our cats, and they sent one for Oscar for celebrating his first appointment with him years ago, and that kind of broke our hearts. But they did a very nice job. But they actually went above and beyond. They were thoughtful enough to remove his collar. I put the key on the collar. The old camo one he's always worn. That was nice of them. And then they went a step further. They gave us this. They took his paw prints. And it's in a neat little thing where you can put a picture. So I'm gonna find a good picture. Maybe that one of him as a kitten with the 1919. Maybe one from one of the videos, or maybe my wife has one on her phone. We're not really picture people. Me, it's pretty obvious, but neither is she. But we'll find a nice little picture of him to put here, and probably put his collar around like that, and put that next to him on the shelf. So we thought that was really nice that they did those extras. I'm sure it's part of the package. We just didn't know, and they didn't tell us, so it's a nice thought. And we thought that was it, but actually a couple hours later, they had given my wife an envelope, and she thought it was just a medical report or a receipt. It was actually this letter. Obviously, it's a form letter. But again, it's a small thing. But it's the thought that counts. And it talks about moving on and finding another cat or dog or anyone to love and take care of is a way of honoring him. Yeah, so even though this is a very hard thing, sentimental fool that I am, they handled it with respect and dignity and caring, which is all anyone can do. Hey, little buddy. All right. Let's wrap this up. Well, appreciate you being here with me. Again, I do apologize for not having videos lately, but I hope this explains it. That's the point of this channel. It's kind of therapy for me in a lot of ways. Ending where we began. We kind of got through the full moon, and now we're in the waning moon. The other cats, notice he's gone too. Again, Hobo doesn't have anyone to argue, in a friendly way with the chair over. Earl, the cat, probably most of you know, the kind of yellow-orange one that's in a lot of the videos, he's completely lost. Oscar always took pity on him because Earl's not the smartest. Oscar would actually help him groom, and and he'd let him sit with him in the chair. He'd share the chair with Earl. Although, conversely, when Earl had the chair, he'd never share it with Oscar. Greedy much? Anyway, and Earl's completely lost. Earl's even tried to start jumping on the arm of the chair sometimes to take his spot. And for a split second, especially the first few days, I thought, I just reached over, not even thinking Oscar was there, and that hurt. Peanut, my tripod that I've talked about and shown several times, who is also a stripy cat, those two get along well. She's not a big fan of the other cats, but Oscar, she'd sit with. In fact, they'd sit together in my lap in the chair, all three of us. Get a little crowded. Although when we had the really cold winter a few years ago, it's kind of nice. But especially the first couple of days, she kept looking over at his spot, like, where's he at? And yeah, so she's missing him. Seamus is missing him. He's kind of wandering around meowing at us, kind of crying. He's been very clingy to my wife especially, but me too. And kind of the funniest thing, Peanut has started sleeping on Oscar's pillow. She never did before, but, you know, that's the last place he was, and my wife talked about maybe we should wash it, and I said, not yet. Let's leave his smell on there for the other animals. And I think it worked, because she likes sleeping on it now. And it kind of harkens back to 2014 when my dog died, Prince died, when Oscar slept on his pillow. So, I don't know. Now she's kind of taking that spot, and I think he would have been perfectly okay with that. He was a good sharing little buddy. So guys, that's been my couple of weeks, but I'm okay. It's bittersweet. It hurts, but it's better to hurt than to not feel anything at all. That's for damn sure. And when we're ready, we're going to go to the shelter, and we're going to look for a timid little cat in the back, quiet. Maybe needs a little coaxing and people to work with him, and we're going to rescue him. Because like that paperwork said, you know, that's the best thing to do is carry on. Help someone else. And we will. But not yet. Not unless someone shows up in our yard like Hobo or Oscar for that matter. Maybe he'll send his replacement. I don't know. Is cat reincarnation a thing? Wouldn't put it past him. If a little gray kitten shows up, we'll know for sure, won't we? Especially if he gets stripes later in life. But for right now, we're just not quite there yet. A couple more months, maybe. We'll see. But there it is. There it is. Again, I appreciate you kind of being with me as I talk about this. And I will get back to the model videos. I do promise. Maybe even this weekend. I don't have a lot going on tomorrow. So yeah. But gonna miss that cat. Dog, cat, doesn't matter. You never forget them, and so you never completely stop missing them. And they're all unique. They're all different. There are similarities sometimes, but never the same. You'll never replace one. But, you know, there's someone new out there somewhere. What do you think? I know at least one of my viewers has lost his cat, actually pretty much exactly the same age. He'll voice in the comments if he wants. So he just went through this a month or two ago. Pretty similar situation, really. Except his cat unfortunately got to the rougher end of things. Not totally to the end, but I'm thankful that Oscar, we caught it early enough that he didn't have to suffer. So there you go, and he'll be with me. You know, if he was an outdoor cat or whatever, I would scatter his ashes, but nope, he liked being with us, so he'll be with us. I can't promise that when I'm gone that I won't request his little box gets put with me. It's entirely possible because I'm a stupid sentimental fool like that. Alrighty, guys. Next time, I promise it'll be a more uplifting video. But thank you for today. This is Misha, and I'm going to go and get some rest. Catch you very soon next time.